where I used to live when I was young, lorries full of animals used to travel past me all day long on the quiet roads and disappear down country lanes. And I always used to think, for many years, that they were taking these sheep, they were all looking out the side of the vehicle, down to new fields. They'd eaten all the grass in one field, they were going to another field, blissfully ignorant as a child. But when I went to look one day, I find all these vehicles parked up at the bottom of this lane, a country lane, big windowless buildings, and I was a little bit inquisitive as a child, so I went to have a look, and I slid the doors aside on one of these big wooden buildings, and there were so many different dead bodies and animals hung up, a big bin with all animal body parts in them, animals laying on the floor. And for me, that was a big wake-up call. I had no idea. It never occurred to me that this is what we did with animals. I'd only ever seen them live. And then you go to the supermarket that's meat. There's a bit in the middle that was always missing for me, and suddenly this was it. It did dawn on me that this was something that was wrong. And from there on, I was getting a trickle feed, a little bit of information from here and there. I'd see a poster with an animal, with a monkey with electrodes coming out of its head, and all too weird. And all of a sudden, all this came on me, and it was a big wake-up call for me. With a visit to a slaughterhouse by accident. I was 15 at the time. I stopped eating meat immediately. It just dawned on me. It all came to me like a light came on. It was a dark, horrible building, creaky wooden door. It smelled so horrible, but a light came on for me. It broke my heart in an instant because it just didn't occur to me that this was going on in my country, in my town. We were civilized. It was a civilized society. I kept being told from the television and my teachers at school. We were civilized, and suddenly, we weren't. And from there on, I used to go looking. I would then go looking for these kind of places. I did my research. I found out why and what it was all about, and contacted other organisations, the national groups that were involved with animal protection work and all that, and got more information and went looking for these places to try and understand it better and make other people aware. However, we've been taken away from our connection with the earth and what we are on this planet. And a lot of it's to do with the media, and it's about generating income. People want to make more money. They're told they've got to make more money as quickly as possible, so we cram more animals in as tightly as possible. How that can happen, it fails me, because it would never happen to me. I would do without the money all day long. I'm not interested, but some people are driven by profit and by competition, and they forget that they're dealing with living beings, which is what we're here to do. We're here to remind these people that these are living beings and they've got a right. Well, partly this was to do with one of the first jobs I had, and one of the only jobs I've had where I've been in paid employment. I was on a training course while I was in school, and the project they sent me on was at a farm. And I kind of liked the idea because it was out in the countryside, but it was an animal farm. It was where they were breeding cows for milk. And again, up to this point, I had no idea. It kind of dawned on me now about we're killing these animals for their meat, but you don't kill an animal for milk, surely. What would be the point of that? But the reality is something very different, and that was another rude awakening for me, to realise that I used to see, when I'd go into work in the morning, very early in the morning, I'd cycle down, and these cows, big beautiful cows, were whining, really pained and uncomfortable, not happy, and they'd all look across this one field. There'd be 20 or 30 of these cows, and they'd all be like really uncomfortable, and they'd be whining across this field. And the second day I went, I asked the farmer, do they want feeding, what is it? And he'd say, no, their calves have been taken off them. They were only 2 days old, their calves, and driven to the farm that was 2 or 3 miles away, and they were stored at this farm. And they knew, the cows knew where they were. They sensed that these animals, their babies, were within reach, and they were so uncomfortable about it. And it all came to me then. He explained to me, this is how the dairy industry works. You've got to take the calf off the mother to take the milk off the cow, What a weird thing to do. It was even worse in some respects than the meat, because it was so hidden and sinister to do that to a cow, to any female animal, to take its baby off it, to drink its milk. It was just too weird. So, that was it again. I became vegan. Well, I rescued a rabbit. It was a very simple thing, but for me it meant such a lot. And for this rabbit, when I was walking to school, I used to see a rabbit in a backyard, in somebody's backyard. There was no grass in the yard, it was just a concrete yard in a box. This thing was in they call a hutch. It's a box with a bit of wire on it, and it didn't have any water that was clean, it didn't have any food, and it was just in this box all the time. And every time I'd walk to school and back, it was in the same box. It never got let out. So after a week or so of this, I put a note through these people's door, through their letterbox, to say to them, look, do something with the rabbit, please. It's not fair. And a week later, it was still in the box. So a week after that, I snuck out of my bedroom window, down the drain pipe out of my bedroom window in my hall wall, went to the rabbit, got in their garden, took it out of the box, put it in my bag and took it home. And it lived with me then for 6 years in my flat. It was a house rabbit. And she always used to attack me. She was a beautiful rabbit, and she got so much life back in her after having some space to run about. And every time I get out of bed in the morning for the first few weeks until I realised, she'd run out of bed and go, try and bite my ankle. So this cat rabbit was an amazing character, and it had a personality. It was such an important individual for me, you know. And I realised then how important it was. This rabbit wasn't going to get its life back by any other way other than by me going rescuing it. And that was it really for me. That was my destiny, if you like. Well, I knew before I did it that it was the wrong thing to do, which is why I waited until it was dark. I knew instinctively it was the wrong thing to do, but in my heart it was the right thing to do. I knew it was illegal, but that didn't have any impact on me at all. It didn't make me consider at all, except that I needed to avoid to be arrested. And the fact that it was illegal has never had any consideration for me whatsoever. That's not what's important to me. These are living beings, and they need to be released from the pain and suffering that they're going through. So the law doesn't come into it. There's a higher moral law that we have to pay attention to, not the criminal law that's created by criminals effectively, who are into animal abuse and other forms of violence.